Hi, I'm Lindsay. I am a behavioral scientist who focuses on employee engagement. And I usually speak with HR and internal communicators. So, hi, you're a very different audience for me, and I'm sure I'm probably a very different speaker. And I guess a few more credentials I want to just mention. I don't care about my CV, but you should know I'm not a wellness guru, and I'm not a psychologist. But a large part of why we do what we do is driven by our emotions. And that's what behavioral scientists study, right? We study why do we make the decisions that we do? Why do we act the way we do? And it's largely driven by emotions. And then your emotions also greatly, I think, affect your performance at work. So what I would like to talk about today, there I am. I'm not going to read the CV to you, but what I want to talk about today is a few, I guess just really let's talk about our feelings. And before I get into it, I do want to tell a quick story. This might have a bit of a trigger warning for some of you that have dealt with suicide, but in between when I was asked to do this speech and then today, I did have a colleague commit suicide 2 weeks ago, and it really, I think, brought home for me the importance of mental health. You know, we talk about it, but like this stuff matters because this stuff can kill, right? And so we have an obligation to ourselves and to our colleagues to take care of ourselves and to check in on ourselves. And something I've noticed with my colleagues over the past 2 weeks is we've really, we're a close team anyway. We're a team of about 50 people based here in London and then up in New York as well. And we've been having some really uncomfortable conversations because it's an uncomfortable topic, but there's just like so many feelings flowing out that it's really forced us to do that. And I guess on that note, what I would like to ask everybody here is I want you to think about the most uncomfortable conversation that you have ever had in the workplace. And I know what mine is. I will not share it here, but if you find me after, I will gladly tell you what went down. And what I want you to think about is the emotions associated with that. So maybe there was anger, maybe there was shame, maybe there was fear, maybe there was grief. But the point is, if you got through that conversation, which y'all did because you're here today, then you guys can talk about your feelings in a group setting and in a one-on-one setting. So I'm going to make you guys do it right now. As Mark said in the beginning, the last 18 months have been, they've been something, right? They've been something. So who has felt uncertainty at all in the last 18 months? Yeah. Who has felt grief in the last 18 months? What about anger? Yeah. Anger is a strong emotion. You know that the negative emotions are about twice as powerful as positive ones, so that's not surprising. And then, I don't know, maybe anxiety a little bit, yeah? Cool. So we're going to talk about all those. We're going to unpack them each and talk about some tips on how to manage them, but I guess just the last point I want to make on why feeling good at work matters, and this is more from a personal productivity and business bottom line, is every single day we all ask ourselves one question. This one, right? You wake up and you go, how hard do I want to work today? And I reckon your answer falls on a scale between the bare minimum to not get fired and the most I can do if I'm really engaged and productive, right? And I can be really engaged and productive when I feel good. So, this stuff matters. Okay, so which goblins do we want to watch out for? I probably could have chosen, dozens and dozens, but I was told I had 20 minutes, so we're going to talk about 4. And I chose these ones. So we've got burnout, uncertainty, frustration, and sadness. So I'm going to unpack each of these from a behavioral science perspective, followed with some tips. And I want to start with burnout. Who has ever felt burned out? Yeah, I'm surprised there's not more hands. The World Health Organization, they finally put it in their kind of international classification of diseases, And they call it a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. And I think the key word there is workplace stress, right? They took the time to add in the fact that it's work that is doing this to us. So burnout really, right? It's the state of kind of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion. It's created by this prolonged stress. And at work, I really think burnout is a mix of things like motivation and workload and morale and environment and your teammates. Something in there is misaligned. And I think the thing that really gets me about burnout that I hear companies say all the time is they categorize it as a self-care issue. And there is an element of that in there, but when people are like, oh, we need more support, and then a company says, well, here's some free yoga classes, go take care of yourself, that's problematic, and we see that all the time. So burnout is so much more than a self-care issue, and in a little bit, I'm going to talk about how we can create the space and the time and the permission to do the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves and rest up when we're feeling burnt out. Okay, next emotion is uncertainty, and this is one of my, I guess, as a geeky behavioral scientist, I find uncertainty fascinating and the things we do when we're in an uncertain state. And one of them is that we can do nothing, right? So uncertainty can be paralyzing. It feels like a big threat, and we register, little difference between a real life or death threat and a prolonged, nasty bout of uncertainty at work. But control is one of the best defenses against uncertainty. And so this is probably the only time in my life I will tell a group of people to try to be more controlling. But it helps. So I encourage people to think about, when the big bad world is out there, there's a lot more in our remit to control than we give ourselves credit for. So can you control your schedule? Can you control your sleep? Can you control, just tiny things around you that make the uncertainty a little less, I guess, scary of a place? And there was this interesting study that was looking at blood donors, and it gave one group the opportunity to pick which arm they were going to have the needle in, and the other group didn't. And the group that had that little bit of control that got to pick which arm, the big bad needle went in, they documented the experience as much less stressful and painful. And when they were, correlating all the factors as to that, they found out that it was really control that made the difference in that experience. Frustration. Okay, we all have that person, right? We all have that colleague or maybe that client, and you see their name come in over email, and you just think, God, I can feel my blood pressure rising. I know who those people are in my life. So frustration, right? And what it really, I guess, extends from is it occurs when something gets in the way of us reaching our goals. So when we get frustrated, though, it's especially problematic because it also triggers these other emotional responses that are quite negative, such as, anger. And this is a problem because when we feel negative, it can often lead us to other unhealthy behaviors. And we're also just in a really bad mood, right? And really hard on ourselves. And I think that frustration is a tricky emotion to manage because it also disrupts a few things that are really important for collaboration at work. So it disrupts our ability to reason. Collaboration goes down. We're more likely to place blame. But the one thing that always helps me when I feel frustrated, and I'm going to give it to you, is something called the fundamental attribution error, which is this tendency that we have to kind of ascribe someone's bad behavior to an innate character flaw versus it being situational. So driver cuts you off in traffic, right? Oh man, they're such a jerk. When in fact, it turns out they're rushing their pregnant wife to the hospital. And so I try to remind myself, it is incredibly unlikely that my colleague is deliberately being an ass. Most people are not deliberately going out of their way to be a jerk or an asshole. I can tell this is a controversial statement. There's some murmurings. Okay, I don't know. Maybe you'll work with assholes. I don't know. I don't work with developers. Teach me something after this session. But that works for me because I work with really nice people. Okay, last but not least, sadness. We've lost a lot of time with friends, with family, and I just feel like there's been sort of this like accumulating grief almost. Like it's a really interesting form of sorrow that we've all kind of collectively gone through. And as our grief and our soul searching continue, we are at risk at growing increasingly dissatisfied at work, which not good for mental health. But the other thing about sadness is that it can lead us to look for an escape or look for a coping mechanism, right? So you may see, substance abuse go up or things like that. So kind of really, I think, leaning into our sadness and owning what it is can help us to better manage it. And I have one tip to that that's worked for me. Well, I guess before that, 2 tips. I think if we can bring that saxophone guy out from the start, I don't think I've laughed that hard in so long. His commitment to the role was admirable. But the tip that I have is, and you're going to think, of course, the girl from California would say this, but it's gratitude journaling. So science has shown that just 15 minutes of writing down what you're thankful for, thinking about what you're thankful for. If you're lazy like me and you don't want to write, but you just want to think about kind of all the influences in your life that help you out, it's been shown to have a huge impact on mood. So I kind of like to start my day with it, like just when you're lying in bed and you think, oh, made it through another night. Okay, morning, let's do this. And I kind of stop and I give myself 5 minutes to think about what I'm grateful for. And it's a really great way to kind of set your mood on a good path. All right, so I've got about 7-8 minutes left. And I thought, we've talked about how we can support, ourselves, and really, I think, leaning into our emotions and acknowledging them and, trying to find healthy ways to deal with it. But I also want to talk about how we can support our colleagues. So I've got, I guess, a few tips here, and I want to start with empathy. So I think empathy is really the key when it comes to supporting our colleagues, and it's really, about being able to kind of experience the world as someone else does. And if we're better able to feel and understand someone's concern, then we're much more likely to help solve those issues, right? So empathy, I really think of it like a spotlight that kind of focuses attention on where we need it the most. All right, so you say, okay, yeah, Lindsay, that sounds really good. How do we practice this? And the good thing is you can. So empathy really starts with curiosity. And I want to challenge you to think about how you currently get information from the people around you, right? So how are you currently checking in? How are you sort of able to, get a sense for how they're feeling? And it's even things like coffee check-ins or asking how they are and then asking how they really are if, they seem down. Maybe there's the tone of, online posts and stuff. But just think about how you get information from the people around you and maybe try to dial that up. The other good thing about empathy is that it leads us to compassion, which is actually what causes us to act. And it turns out that compassion is not a fixed trait. So we may think, oh no, I'm not like the most compassionate human. Maybe I'm a little bit selfish. Sounds like based on the reaction to the frustration question, perhaps that is a little bit widespread. But compassion is not a fixed trait, and we can actually improve it. And again, another research-backed method on kind of improving our compassion is with a short exercise I'm going to ask you all to do. So I'm going to ask you all to close your eyes, just for like a second. I'm going to do it too, and then I'll try not to walk so I don't knock over equipment. So close your eyes, and then you're supposed to think about like extending kindness to like the people around you. And again, I know it sounds new agey, but stay with me. So it's kind of like this idea of like sending good vibes out, and just kind of the authors of the study said as well that if you just pick even one person in your day to like extend kindness to, maybe it's the person on the tube, maybe it's that colleague that, it looks like they're having a tough day, but just think about being kind. Like, Maybe we don't spend enough time thinking about how we can be kind to others. And then finally, ask better questions. So kind of that genuine dialogue, it really promotes trust, and I think the honest conversations we need to have, and a really great first question to ask that also isn't too much into the feelings if you're, feeling your way into the feelings is, what are the biggest barriers to your success right now, and how can I help? Okay. Again, I think another quick way to check in on your colleagues is thinking about all the different ways that you get information from them, right? So do you have someone in your life that maybe there's differences that you're noticing in their day-to-day routines? Maybe they're quiet in meetings all of a sudden. Maybe they're really unresponsive on email and that's not like them, or they're taking a bunch of time. But really just any change in their behavior, check in on them, right? I think mental health is kind of our collective responsibility. We have a responsibility to ourselves, but we have a responsibility to others. I'm going to skip this story, but I will tell you later if you find me. And so I guess where I want to end on is there's really, I think, two things that we need to collectively be better at. And that is creating permission to talk about our feelings at work, right? So normalizing the conversation, and then creating the permission to take the time and space that we need to care for ourselves. So I think with creating permission to take time out, this one comes from the top, and this is when I hone it in on the HR leaders that I talk to. I say, well, what are your leaders doing, right? Because that sets the tone. I knew one CEO who constantly called someone on their lunch break where they would go running, and so she was always answering the phone out of breath, and finally the CEO was like, oh, is there a better time that I can call you? Or in your email signatures, right? Maybe you all work strange hours and you can say, look, this is the time that it works for me, but I don't expect a response. But just things that normalize that you can take that break, people around you take breaks, and we're just very communicative about where we are. And then I think this one's the most important. So creating permission to share how we're feeling. And again, a lot of this comes through storytelling. So at work, if we work with internal communication teams, we ask, how are you surfacing these stories? And so if you see your company put out a call for stories around, health or mental health or purpose or culture or anything, please respond, because we do use a lot. We do use that content. We need it, and it helps to normalize kind of the topic. I think Facebook did this really well. So Facebook ran a campaign called Open Up, and so it basically encouraged people to share stories of mental health, struggles, and then also mental health triumphs. And they underpinned the campaign with butterflies. It was really beautiful because butterflies were this universal symbol of hope, and they put up these huge installations all over all the campuses, and then they had this dedicated database where all the stories were. So I just think that storytelling is really powerful, and we just need to talk about it. So I know I'm out of time, so I guess, or 90 seconds. I guess I just want to leave on the note that I know it can be weird to talk about this crunchy, feeling stuff, but it's really important. And the only way that it gets less weird is if we all normalize the behavior. So we all start to check in on each other. We all answer authentically. If someone asks how I am and I'm not great, it's okay for me to say that I'm not great, or say, oh, do you have a minute to talk? Actually, there's something on my mind. So we just have to collectively get better about speaking up, and we collectively have to remember that mental health is not just depression or anxiety. It shows up in so many ways. It's motivation, it's burnout, it's uncertainty, it's so much bigger. And so anything that you're feeling right now, it's okay, it's okay, and there's people to talk with, and I hope if you take anything away from this 20 minutes, it's that talk some more about your feelings. Thank you.